Peggy covers politics, education, transportation, and crime in Virginia. Please join me in welcoming Peggy to the stage.
Good morning. It's great to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me today. And I'm really excited to be here to talk about all the business opportunities and the economy here in Northern Virginia. It's my longtime home. I'm a native of Springfield, Fairfax County, so anytime we can talk about this area and opportunities out there and growing it, I'm all in. So it's going to be an engaging discussion here with all of our top elected leaders, and it's my pleasure to introduce them right now. I'd like to start with Allison Silberberg. She was sworn in as mayor of Alexandria in January of 2016. She served as vice mayor in the Alexandria City Council from 2012 to 2015. When I call your name, you can come on up and take a seat. And we'll hold applause till the end. How about that? And we also like to bring up the Honorable Corey Stewart. He was re-elected chairman at large of the Prince William Board of County Supervisors in 2015. Corey was first elected as chairman in 2006. And the Honorable Sharon Bulova was re-elected chairman of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors in 2015. She was first elected chairman in a special election in February of 2009. And welcome her. And the Honorable Phyllis Randall was elected as chair of the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors in November of 2015. The Honorable Fisette was elected to the Arlington County Board of Supervisors in 1998, serving as the board's chair in 2001, 2005, 2010, and 2014. Please welcome all of our top elected leaders. So we'd like to invite you to submit your questions to the elected leaders. If you'd like to participate, please write down your question on the note card that was given to you at registration, and a staff member will come by to collect these cards. So please remember to keep your questions focused on regional business issues, and all questions will be kept anonymous. So thank you very much. I'm going to sit down here because I know my mic is on here, if that's okay, right? You guys can still hear me? Isn't that something? I want to start first with the biggest story out there, I think, for our country, as well as Hurricane Irma as it approaches, and we just finished, we're still watching the devastation in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. And I know Virginia Task 1 has been deployed this morning to head out and help with Hurricane Irma. So I'd like to start with Chairman Bulova. What do you do as an elected leader in getting ready for a storm like that and making the certain possible evacuations? When do you decide? What do you do? And how do you avoid putting out some kind of evacuation and putting people on roadways which might make them sitting ducks?
Well, what a good question. I guess the most important thing for an elected official to do is to communicate. And right now, our Office of Emergency Management is pushing out information about preparedness and making sure that we're aware of the track of the hurricane and other things that are going on around us. So really, it's knowing as much as possible in advance, paying attention, communicating with the community, having the communication tools available and well-honed, and also having an engaged community that knows how to work with their local government when there is some kind of a critical incident that's happening within the county or the region.
I saw some criticism that some people said in Houston, they weren't told to get out, there was nothing mandatory, but then people said, well, you can't put all these people on roadways. And of course, it made me think of this region with, we know what traffic's like. We know what happened after 9/11 when roads were just clogged with people. Chairman Stewart, what is your response? What do you do, and how much do you work together with your other elected leaders here in the area?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we all cooperate. There's very good cooperation in Northern Virginia among all the localities. And what I would add, in addition to what Sharon said, is we instruct our residents to always be prepared for at least 3 days worth of food and water and other necessities. Because obviously when there's a mass situation like that, we can't get to everybody. So people need to be prepared to be on their own and survive on their own for at least a few days.
Let me ask Mayor Silberberg, you've got a jurisdiction that always floods. Sorry about that. You're in a floodplain, for God's sake. No, so what do you have additional warnings, or what do you do in Alexandria?
Well, first of all, thanks to the business community for having all of us here today, and thank you for joining us as the moderator in response. Obviously, we're a city on a river, and we voted probably a year or so ago for flood mitigation, so you'll see a lot less nuisance flooding in the future. In fact, a lot of it's been reduced by measures that we've already taken the last year or so. So I'm very proud of that, and we're going to do more. But emergency preparedness is something that we should all be doing anyway, all the time. And we talk about that leaders at the federal level and at the state level and at the local level. It's really critical, as Mr. Stewart just said, to always be prepared. We are tracking this like everyone else, Hurricane Irma. We're discussing any kind of preparation. We certainly will be communicating, as Chairman Bulova just mentioned. None of us really knows yet, but as far as Houston, it's hard to Monday morning quarterback what Mayor Turner did or didn't do. I'm originally from Dallas, grew up there, so I have a lot of friends and family in that region, and what was shocking about it was the ferocity of it all, right? And they're saying that this Irma is the worst storm ever, apparently. So clearly, weather, nature reminds us who's in charge. But we do need to be prepared, and it is tragic, I think. Obviously, we all feel our hearts go out to everyone in the Houston, Beaumont, Port Arthur area, and Southeast Texas. And flood insurance is apparently not commonly had in that region. Yeah, that's really shocking to me, frankly. People were told to stay put, and people of all backgrounds were affected by the hurricane in Houston area, and as you know. But I can just say that if people can give to the relief fund that the mayor created, or to the American Red Cross, or to the charity of your choice, that it'll all make a difference. But we need to help our neighbors there.
Chair Fisette, would you want to add something?
Yeah, let me just comment. This is a critical function of government. That's the first thing. And in 2001, I happened to be chair of the county board here in Arlington. We did not have the same kind of warning you may have in that incident that you have with a hurricane and a weather disaster like we're seeing in the Gulf develop now. But it is all about, I think we're very proud of the response. Everyone that looked at our after action, how we did, felt pretty good about it, but we've gotten even better, as has the other localities here. It's all about planning, investing in your emergency preparedness professional staff, having them do the tabletops and the exercises in advance. The mutual aid within Northern Virginia was already in place, so that as our fire stations collapsed on the Pentagon, in Fairfax they collapsed into Arlington, and Loudoun and Prince William they backed up in Fairfax. That was all in place, and honestly, since 9/11, it's gotten substantially better. We've gotten interoperability with the communication systems that we didn't have at that time. So through the Council of Governments, the Regional Emergency Preparedness Council, which the professionals, the electeds all serve on, we got even better. We also got federal money to help do further investments. And we engage the community and train and educate them through volunteer programs to step in at the right time. But the bottom line is there was a lot of messaging, and Sharon mentioned this. As an elected official, your role is a lot around communication to the public, with the public, coordinating with your colleagues in local government. And the primary message for in most instances, is stay put. Don't follow your instinct and go to the school to get your kid. Don't follow your instinct to get on the road and clog the roadways to keep the professionals from being able to do their work. Now, tune in, listen to the advice and the information. Every incident is a little different, but your first instinct should be to stay put and hunker down and prepare for that eventuality, that possibility, not get in the car and drive somewhere.
Chairman Randall, do you want to add anything?
I would associate myself with most comments that were said up here. I would also remind people that not everyone has all the opportunity not everyone's going to go to the county website to get the information. So if you remember to send things out with different forms of social media, the different people might be engaged in. So the Snapchats, the Instagrams, the Facebooks, the Twitter is how many people, especially young people, communicate. And so if we're going to communicate something this important, let's remember to do it on all platforms. And now it's not the time to have the conversation, but at some point, when you have the storm of the century every 5 years, at some point you have to have a conversation about climate change and if it's real or not. And by the way, I think it is, because these storms are coming fast and furious. I think hurricane season ends at the end of November, and we've had Harvey, we now have Irma, and we're looking at Tropical Storm Jose, which is not far behind. This is not normal. This is not how it should happen. So we should take care of our fellow Americans right now, but they need more than anything else is money. But at some point, we have to all get serious at the county levels, about talking about climate change.
Let's move on. We want to talk about Metro now, and this question is for Jay Fisette. Metro continues to dominate the headlines in this region. Recently, there was a proposal that would have added a 1-cent sales tax increase to fund Metro in jurisdictions that participate in the Washington Metropolitan Transit Authority. This proposal received bipartisan, near unanimous opposition from elected officials in Virginia. What makes sense for Virginia in funding the future needs of Metro?
Okay, it's a great question. There were about 20 ways of wording that question. That's the one, someone chose. Let's face it, though, it's the most significant single issue facing the region today. And there is, in fact, great consensus on that fact. And there is great consensus on the fact that for the economic sustainability, the long-term future viability and prosperity of this region, this has to be solved. We've been putting off this question of a dedicated, sustainable funding stream for Metro for a long, long time. I've been here a while. This isn't the first time it's come up. We cannot lose this short-term opportunity with the pressure that's been built, a new general manager who's doing a terrific job, improvements in the operation, improvements in the reliability, improvements in the safety, tough decisions being made, business community, citizens, elected officials are in agreement, by and large, there's an outlier here and there, but by and large, that this is the issue of our time to save and improve the economy and the future of the region. So what is the exact solution in terms of a funding stream from Virginia? That is not yet determined. And I can't sit here and say what it should be. Is the sales tax one that should still be on the table? I believe yes. In some form, maybe at different rates in different localities, find out where it's collected and then who's actually paying. Virginia actually contributes, if you add it up, about 50% to the regional sales tax. But that's where it's collected. We don't know actually who's paying that. How many people are from outside the region? Tourists paying that. How many are from Prince William or Prince George's coming and spending money in Fairfax or Arlington or the district and otherwise? If we got a better handle on that, we might get to a more equitable solution on sales tax, but it's not the only option either. The existing formula that allocates a percentage to Maryland, Virginia, and the district is a fair formula. It's been crafted over time. That should be at the heart of that proportional additional money. But I do want to say one thing right now is that I think the moment is now to actually put pressure on all of us to solve this in the next legislative session. Everyone agrees you need dedicated, you need new funding source or sources. We can't keep putting this off for 2 years more and 3 years more and worrying about the election cycle in this locality or that locality. It's time to do it. Short-term solutions And we're hearing people say now, and it bothers me, oh, it's going to take a bunch of years. If the pressure comes off and we put it off another year and another year, it will not get easier in my view. It will get harder. And I can tell you from my locality's point of view, this past year, our numbers went up. We're paying $84 million out of our pay-go general obligation money and our bonds. And that's a substantial increase by nearly 100% of what we were doing before in our total contribution from Arlington. We cannot be the default to make up the difference. Arlington does not have the capacity. The localities in Virginia, and I'm sorry for talking too long, I'm going to stop at the end of this. People still do not understand that the funding mechanism in Virginia is different than Maryland. In Maryland, the state pays the whole tab. In Virginia, the localities pay the majority of it. We have to go to our voters every year. The state contributes to it, but the majority of the money comes from Fairfax, Arlington, Falls Church, Alexandria, taxing our own residents. And this last year, the bill skyrocketed, and we want to be a part of the solution, but it's affecting our available funds for schools and other things. We cannot be. We need a new dedicated funding source.
Is the solution in Richmond, and what do you do about
Clearly,
that?
the two general assemblies have to make a decision. In Maryland, it appears that it's going to be Montgomery and Prince George's that are going to have to generate some new revenue, which is fine, because those localities here are generating new revenue. In Virginia, it's got to be the state giving us some new authorities to generate funds in our region.
Peggy, can I
Mayor?
just add?
Well, go ahead, okay, Mayor.
We have no call you, but I just want to echo Chairman Fisette's comments. He's right. He's completely spot on. This is a huge, serious issue. And when the Council of Governments Chairman Chuck Bean came to me when I first became the mayor and said, what are some of the main issues that you're going to be focused on? In fact, there is Chuck Bean. I see you. I didn't see you before. Is that I said, my main focus is dedicated revenue stream for Metro. This is a business issue, an economic issue. It's the economic backbone of our region. We've got to get this right. It's tourism, it's business, it's our lives. And it has to be safe and reliable. And we can't keep depending upon our local budgets at the city level and then the county level to fund this. We've got to have this dedicated revenue stream. Every major metropolitan area with a metro system has such a revenue stream that's dedicated. Now, they've been talking about it for over 20 years, but we need to take action. And I think that right now we're at the best possible point with the various leaders. Even if some of the leadership changes, I think that we are at a moment where we can get this done. And speaking for myself as the mayor of Alexandria, this is so crucial. And we're putting in a 5th metro stop at Potomac Yard. We're building transit-oriented development. We're putting that in. This is crucial. I don't need to explain to you all. You want to have your businesses near a metro stop by and large. So, but in terms of where's that money coming from, I think that the sales tax idea is a winner. But I'm open to other suggestions. It has to be equitable. But I think that we can find a way, and I'm glad that Secretary LaHood was so involved for all the jurisdictions. So, well, we'll keep fighting for this.
Well, Mayor Silberberg, actually, the next question involved JBG and Vornado and their companies, and took what they considered the best 92 properties. Although the properties are spread across the region, one characteristic unites them. Almost everyone, 98%, is within a half-mile of a metro station. That's, after all, where the most valuable real estate is located. So you were just talking about the importance of metro in the economy.
Absolutely. It's directly tied. All of you know that. I'm preaching to the choir here. We have to continue to focus on transit-oriented development. And it makes total sense. And we want to encourage people to take mass transit. It makes sense. Obviously, we still have to accommodate cars. That's part of our world. We're a mixture of urban and suburban, and that's fine. I drove here this morning, but there is a metro stop nearby. But it makes sense. We have to have a dedicated revenue stream. And actually, if the business community, all of you here and those that you represent, could help us achieve this. I know that the Washington Board of Trade's been very focused on this as well. It's a top priority for the Board of Trade. So,
Let me ask Chairman Randall, Metro is coming to Loudoun County, and so what do you think needs to happen?
How are we having a conversation about Metro and we haven't said the word federal government? How are we doing that? Metro moves the federal government's workforce.
Right.
The federal government's workforce. This is, yes, it's about Arlington, Alexandria, and Prince William, and about the region, but if Metro stops moving, the federal government stops moving.
Do we know a percentage of riders?
I know,
the number of riders that are federal government?
the people in DC, 50%, 49% of Metro riders are intra-DC riders. So when you have localities that are paying the same amount as the federal government, that is crazy. Why aren't we talking to Jerry Conley, to Don Beyer, to Barbara Comstock, to Tim Kaine, to Mark Warner? Why aren't we sitting on their doorstep with this question like all the time? You stop Metro, the federal government stops working. Federal government stops working as well as it works. The country stops working. The country stops working. So yes, we should be talking about this because it affects our localities. But I am so confused as to how the federal government pays what Fairfax County pays for Metro. And why aren't we having these conversations? And why isn't the business community talking to these elected officials also?
I mean, I know Chairman Bulova wants to say something, but I'm anticipating Chairman Stewart has something to say. Metro's not in Prince William County. Do you have any idea how many people from Prince William County use Metro, though?
I don't know, but I mean, look, I mean, Prince William County's got we're the second largest locality in the state. We just overtook Virginia Beach. Quite a lot smaller than Fairfax still, though, but we have the largest road construction program in the Commonwealth. We've had it since 1988. So clearly our focus is on road construction. We do, of course, recognize the importance of Metro to the economic growth of the region and to the Commonwealth. But I mean, you know, these are the localities around me that have to deal with the nuts and bolts of it. My only point, in speaking about this beforehand with Sharon, with Chairman Bulova, is that whatever revenue is generated in Virginia needs to stay in Virginia. There's a fairness issue here vis-a-vis the other two jurisdictions that have part of Metro.
And that's a point we all agree on here? Chairman Bulova, what do you think about finding a dedicated revenue stream in Virginia for Metro?
Mr. Fisette gave a very, very good description of the complexity of Metro. And there's not another place in the country that is like us. So we are the federal government, we are Maryland, Virginia, the District of Columbia, and then in a subset in Virginia are the localities. So we collect revenues in different ways. I think that we haven't talked about the governance of Metro, but that is an issue. It's a large board, and alternates play the same role that principals do, and that is confusing and I think not helpful. The funding issue is really the major issue, and the answer will eventually need to be in the General Assembly in Virginia, in Maryland, some kind of, whatever the source of revenue is, and what we have asked for is give us the flexibility to find the source of revenue that works for us in Virginia. It could be the sales tax, it could be some. And the second question is, once all of those revenues are put into a regional pot in order to fund the Metro system, there needs to be agreement on how that funding is allocated, what is fair. And that's something that we're struggling with right now. Just splitting, a third, and a third isn't fair for Virginia. There's some disagreement with DC on using the existing formula, the existing Metro formula. The existing Metro formula takes into account your population, this number of stations that exist in your particular jurisdiction, and the riders that exist in your jurisdiction, and this has been used over decades. And it seems to me that that has been fair and it should be fair for, how to allocate new revenue. If I could wave a magic wand, I wish the federal government could sort of do a metro overlay of the metro jurisdictions, getting to the federal responsibility. We are so unique and so different. And, if there could just be, so I don't know if this is feasible or possible, but to have a metro overlay federal district where there was some, some kind of equitable and fair allocation.
Like different than the Metro Board,
That,
above the Metro Board, get rid of the Metro Board, is that what you're saying?
I didn't say that.
Do you all agree that the Metro Board, let me ask you, do you all
Bulova
agree,
suggests-
how many of you agree the Metro Board is too big?
I would say it's too big.
Too big.
I'm gonna qualify it. I honestly think that Sharon's right. The issue is dedicated funding. And the board, some people like it, some people don't. Some people have interpersonal problems with certain individuals over time. It really doesn't depend as much whether it's appointed, the person's appointed by the state, or whether it's 6 people or 8 or 12. It's who the people are.
But
You've had
when
great
you have more
private
and more
sector
people, it's hard
folks.
isn't it harder to come to a consensus the larger
I
the
don't
group
think
is?
you'll find many people opposing reducing the size of the board. It's really where they're coming from and how they're being appointed. You've had great public sector elected officials on that board, great private sector appointees and state appointees, and you've had terrible ones from all those same sources. So it really is the person you put on that board.
Let's move on, unless there's anything else to talk about Metro. We all want it fixed, right? Okay, let me talk about bridges now. Oh gosh, another hot button issue here. So let me talk to Chairman Randall. Loudoun County recently studied the possibility. Would you like another bridge crossing in Loudoun County? How about that? So your county recently studied the possibility of an additional bridge crossing between Loudoun and Montgomery County. What is the status of this study, and what can the business community do to support the project?
So that was a really interesting meeting for us. We got a full history of how long the bridge has been studied and when the first study was asked for. 1950. 1950 is when the first time somebody said we should study this issue. More than most of us were born, when we started studying this issue. So our county did, our board did vote to continue studying this issue. We've been studying this issue for a long time. Let's continue studying this issue. The question really at this point is, why are we continuing to study this issue? We know what our answer feels like here. And this is an interesting question. What can the business community do? That's hard for me to answer because I don't know what you've done already. So I don't know what I can advise you to do. I know what I've done. I've gotten in my car and drove across the bridge and talked to my counterpart in Montgomery County. And said, what do you think about this? And after many years, Mr. Leggett is now saying, I think this bridge is a great idea. He's actually leaving office now. The person coming into office, very possibly, Roger Berlander, has said, and I quote, no Virginia official should spend 1 nanosecond worrying about the bridge. So I think really elected leaders have pretty much done all we can do. If the business community is going to talk, yes, talk to your counterparts. Let's extend the discussion. Let's talk to environmental groups. Let's talk to the neighbors. Let's talk to the Rotary Club. Let's talk to everybody. Because truly what we have been doing is not working. As most of you know, I am by profession a mental health therapist. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. 1950 is how long we've been doing this. At this point, I think Virginia has studied all we can study. We can't study anything else. We know our answer in Virginia. But if there is another conversation to be held in Maryland, let me know that. And we can all cross that bridge together. Cross that water together and figure this out.
Okay. Chairman Bulova, let me talk to you about this. So Roger Berliner, president of the Montgomery County Council, indicated that fixing the American Legion Bridge should be a priority. This statement was very different to what traditionally has been the position of elected leaders in Montgomery County. You know, you talk about the American Legion Bridge, and what if something happened to that? So what, and then what do we do?
And I agree with Roger Berliner, and we've had the opportunity to sit down with counterparts on both sides, elected officials, to focus on what we can do together, Montgomery County and Fairfax County, to improve transportation. In Fairfax County, we were able to showcase a lot of progress that we've made on our side of the river. The hot lanes on the Beltway, and the Silberberg, and improvements to the road network in that area. What we honed in on was, you know, we can do a lot on our side of the river or on their side of the river, but the connecting mechanism is the American Legion Bridge, and that just stops traffic, and something needs to be done there. And so I agree with Roger Berliner. I think, you know, if we're talking bridges, the priority needs to be the American Legion Bridge. Somehow widening it, or building a duplicate bridge or a tunnel or something, but that needs to really be a regional priority for us to deal with the American Legion Bridge. The advantage, funding-wise, is it's in Maryland. Once you step off the land and into the water, it's actually, you know, on Maryland territory.
What would a new bridge upstream, upriver cost? Anybody have an idea?
Upriver, you need
Another bridge.
Another
Bridge
another-
cost. A new bridge.
It's in the billions.
This imaginary bridge.
It's
on the books.
it's in the billions. And oh, by the way, if we're waiting for the current administration to do the transportation package, infrastructure package, we should stop waiting for that. And from what we understand, a lot of that infrastructure package will be financing. It won't be cash, and it's in the billions.
And I'll just weigh in, and if the real goal is improving mobility and accessibility throughout the region, moving more people, not just more vehicles, then you really have to look at, if you're talking about river crossings, the top two are going to be a new metro tunnel that enhances metro viability and access, and improving the American Legion Bridge. All the studies that I've seen to date, and more will be done, they're more underway now, more analyses and assessments, show that is where the focus would be to actually accomplish those goals. And you ask, what if the bridge blows up? Well, you could kind of ask that about anything. What if the metro center blew up? You know, that's by creating greater interconnectivity even within the metro system. You could put the Purple Line, continue it across at the American Legion Bridge site, or bus rapid transit, a bus rapid transit system and a network throughout the region. HOT lanes expanding into Maryland. There are lots of options that don't bring as well the past identified negative consequences of expanding further west. I mean, an outer bridge also exacerbates the east-west divide within this region, which is part of our mobility challenge right now.
Let me ask Chairman Stewart a question. Loudoun and Prince William remain two of the fastest growing jurisdictions in the Commonwealth, as you indicated as well. While the Bi-County Parkway may not have political will behind it, there is still a need for enhanced north-south connection between these two major localities. What opportunity do you see for this?
Well, I think there are two things. One, Prince William, we've got to do a much better job on 28 on our side of the river. There are public hearings going on, I think tonight, actually, about this. It's got to become a priority for the county and place the widening of 28 on our comprehensive plan, and to get that done. But I want to go back to the Bi-County Parkway. This simply must be done. The problem with it, there's several issues, but when our last attempt, which did not succeed, obviously, Part of the problem was the battlefield, and trying to get this agreement together with the battlefield, with the federal government. Very, very difficult to do. We think we can avoid that by moving the route of 234 extended to a little bit further west into private lands and completely outside the battlefield. I think that would be a good way, at least in Prince William, to get this started. But the real problem with the Bi-County Parkway is funding. It was taken off of our comprehensive plan, unfortunately, in Prince William County. That's not the real problem. The problem is, of course, we need funding from the state government. If I were a member of the business community, I would do two things. I would do one thing. I would get both of the candidates for governor on record about whether or not they support funding the Bi-County Parkway. Unless the next governor supports that project, it's not going to happen. I think you need to get both Mr. Gillespie and Mr. Northam on the record with regard to the funding of the Bi-County Parkway.
This isn't just about Prince William County, it has to do with the economy across the region.
It does. It's critical. It's critical to Fairfax. Excuse me. It's actually critical to Fairfax as well. So much of the traffic that is currently going through Fairfax will be shifted to the Bi-County Parkway. And obviously there are significant advantages for Loudoun and Prince William.
Loudoun has not taken the Bi-County Parkway off our CTP. It's still in our comprehensive plan and in our CTP. And by the way, it's also a corridor of statewide significance. And so we are and we have been fully behind the Bi-County Parkway. That has not changed. We are more than willing to sit down with state officials of officials of Prince William County to talk about the alignment. That's something that we're happy to have that conversation. But we have always been committed to having the Bi-County Parkway. That has not changed.
And this isn't just about moving people, it's about moving goods as well.
Absolutely it is.
Let's move on, Chairman Randall. According to a recent report from JLL, Northern Virginia is posed to continue its growth in the data center market. This growth will be made possible in part by newer energy sources, which include natural gas and renewables, even as utilities continue retiring older coal-fired power plants. What role have data centers played in diversifying Loudoun's tax base? Is the county's Loudoun planning, do you envision Loudoun planning process part of that preparation?
So Loudoun County is the data center capital of the world. 70% of the world's internet traffic moves through Loudoun County, 70%. So, talk about the most important county in the region, it's us.
In the world. Actually, in the world.
I'm good with that. Even during the lowest parts of the recession, our data center market kept Loudoun County growing. We received last year $180 million in local tax revenue from our data center market. And the data centers have an incredible return on investment. For every $1 spent, we get $9.50 back from our data center. So our data center market has been incredibly important to us. It allows us to lower our personal property tax because our business property taxes are being paid more by our data centers. Having said that, we're also trying to talk about diversifying our economy in other ways, and the data centers play a big role in that. A lot of companies want to be around a data center mecca like Loudoun County. So when you talk about health IT, when you talk about big data, when you talk about data analytics, when you talk about cybersecurity, all those things want to be located around the data center market, especially things in the federal government. And so the data market has kept us strong through the Great Recession, and the data market will actually be what is most key in helping us diversify our economy. When you talk to the head of our ED department, the just amazing Buddy Reiser, he will tell you that we actually have about 10 million square feet of data market space in Loudoun County, and we can double that at full build out. And I will be honest with you, we don't really go out for data centers anymore. They come to us. I mean, they beat the doors down to come to us. So we can now be very selective to what data center markets we want to welcome into the county, and because of them, we are able to diversify our economy in a much greater way and be the best county in the world.
Well, I'm sure Chairman Stewart might have a... So Chairman Stewart, a few years ago, the Prince William Board made the decision to invest in a wet lab accelerator in Innovation Park. Talk about the growth that occurred because of this investment, and how has having George Mason University's Science and Technology campus in Prince William helped facilitate that growth?
By the way, I love Loudoun County. I'm running for election next year, so I love Loudoun County. I love all your counties.
The question was Loudoun love him, that's what it was.
We knew we'd do it, we knew it.
With regard to wet lab space, is that the question?
Yes.
All right.
Innovation Park.
Good. I'm glad you didn't ask me about the data centers, because I've got my committee and fan club right here in front. But so wet lab space in Prince William County. Most of the commercially available wet lab space in the region it's unfortunately on the other side of the river. It's in Maryland. So a few years ago in Prince William County, we started a 9,400 square foot wet lab incubator space. It's been very successful. There are currently 8 companies in it right now. There are 6 on the waiting list. A couple of these companies have since graduated out of that incubator space, including Series Nanosciences, and they've opened up a 9,000 square foot facility of their own. So it's been very successful. I hope you don't do that in Loudoun too. We don't need the competition, but it's been a good thing. It's been a great way to cooperate. This academic working together with George Mason University. A lot of the spin-offs have come from George Mason, from professors there, and so it's been a great private government academic partnership.
Chairman Bulova, as part of the 2017 Virginia gubernatorial election, there have been proposals to change Virginia's taxation structure, including eliminating B-poll and machinery and tools, among the other taxes, which provides significant revenue streams to localities in Northern Virginia. What advice would you give to future governors on how to work with local governments to potentially phase out these taxes?
So my answer would be, don't do it. And local governments have so few revenue sources to provide services to our jurisdictions. And so B-poll, I know that the business community does not like B-poll, but then, it is one of our major sources of revenue for local governments in Virginia. And I heard the recommendation for phasing things out as though that makes it easier. It's sort of like pulling the Band-Aid off more slowly. And if B-poll were eliminated or phased out, or machinery and tools, then the pressure would be on your other sources of revenue, which are property taxes, real estate taxes, and you can only do so much in that area before you're essentially taxing people out of their homes and out of their property. So having a wider array of revenue sources is a better thing, and trying to phase out or eliminate some of those sources, really cripples local government and their ability to provide the services that the Commonwealth of Virginia relies upon us. Good education, public safety, human services. These are the things that we provide in local government, and we try to do so with a relatively small number of revenue sources.
Chairman Stewart, what do you think about B-poll taxes?
Well, I think the state's always great at removing local sources of funding. They never seem to cut their own taxes on the state level. And I think that the B-poll tax obviously is a very detrimental tax and is a restraint on growth in the Commonwealth. And we should be looking at ways to reform it. I would love to get rid of it. But as Sharon mentioned, at this point, we're just far too dependent on it. We have been reducing the incidence, though, of B-poll in Prince William County. So when I first became chairman, it began at $100,000 in gross revenue. We've moved that up now to $500,000. So there are fewer and fewer small businesses that are being impacted by B-poll, and we're going to continue to increase that threshold, perhaps up to several $1 million. But at this point, we have to work hard to reduce it, but we just can't get rid of it in a single year, that's for sure.
Chairman Fisette, during the 2017 General Assembly session, the legislature provided more clarity on how localities can regulate services like Airbnb. Talk about the process that Arlington went through, and does this provide a framework for future disruptive technologies?
Sure, and just to add to the last comment, I think nobody likes paying taxes, but there are so few, as Sharon said, that any effort to reform, and it's not a perfect tax, so there may be ways of reforming it, it has to have, as an assumption, revenue neutrality. So if you're going to reform it and find a better or more fair way to tax that stakeholder group, that group, then you have to do that with the local governments being held revenue neutral. And if you can do that, that may be fine. Airbnb, yeah, we're very proud last year of how we, in a relatively short period of time prior to the General Assembly session, went through a community process, driven in fact by two things. One, we had somewhere on the order of a couple thousand, at least, Airbnb properties listed in Arlington, and there was no legal way to have them. In other words, there was no code provision, no legal way to actually have an Airbnb. So we weren't pursuing this, we weren't enforcing this, we recognized the reality of the world we're living in. We also knew that the General Assembly had passed some legislation, the governor had stepped in, put it on hold for a year because there were imperfections in that needed to be improved, and it gave us an opportunity to, one, solve our own problem, address the reality in Arlington, which is the reality in the region. There are a lot of people doing this, and it's happening everywhere. And two, the legislature was about to take this up and grapple with it in a way that we felt if we did a process here, got community input, put our best minds to it, looked at best practices elsewhere in the country, we could help inform the legislative process. Maybe they could learn something from the experience we've had. And we came forward, put something together, I think adopted it last December. It's been quite effective so far. So there is a relatively small fee to register. Only so far a fraction of those that we know are out there have registered, but they will over time come into compliance. There's some revenue, but the revenue stream is relatively modest. It really is an effort to ensure the safe implementation of Airbnb so that any of the mitigation or some of the impact on neighborhood life or neighbors is addressed and understood. And so far we felt pretty good. It's quite flexible. It provides, as this went through the process, it became in fact more flexible rather than less. So we continue to monitor it. I'm sure we'll improve it further, but we've been very pleased with the way it's worked.
Okay, I'm just going to move on because I know there's lots of other issues we want to talk about. Let me ask Mayor Silberberg, what have you learned through the process of consideration of a business improvement district in Old Town? How does Alexandria reverse the trend of a reduction in bricks and mortar retailers that's occurring throughout the region and the country as a whole?
A big issue in Alexandria. We've spent about a year with a task force, if you will, an advisory group, not even a year, just barely a year, discussing it. And the business community weighed in heavily in April, May, and June. And then the council voted to really pause and reassess and look at possibly a reduced version of the original plan. Retail is changing in our country. We know that. But Alexandria, we're really lucky because we have these unique shops that you can't find anywhere else. They're in Old Town, they're in Delray, and they're other parts of our city. So I think when people go shopping today, if they could shop online or shop in person, one of the things that we offer in Alexandria, with all due respect, you might have the best county in the country in terms of data centers. I think we have the best city in the country in terms of unique shops and incredible restaurants. And so you want an experience that you can't find anywhere else. You want to go into a store and find products that you can't find anywhere else. A business improvement district is something that we're considering, but really the business community, it has to be able to benefit everyone, and I think that we have to be extremely careful. This is really a tax at a time when a lot of the businesses are trying to make ends meet as well. I think if there's a way, I'm happy to look at it. I'm happy to take more input from the business community. I ask for the business community to continue to weigh in. But let me just say that we're also in Alexandria very focused on diversifying our economy. And in fact, the National Science Foundation is about to officially open in Alexandria, and we're very excited about this. In addition to the National Science Foundation, it's all that it, what does that mean? It's health, it's tech, it's research, it's all kinds of science. That's not just for Alexandria. Really, if you think about it, that's for Northern Virginia. This can also be our strength, where we can expand upon our technology base of Northern Virginia and focus also on health, research, science. These are huge, high-paying jobs. This is a growth market. I think that not just Alexandria, but we as a region can talk about that. In fact, I know that in Fairfax County, with the new NoVA hospital and also Virginia Hospital and Mayo, this is a very exciting time. And so I want us to continue to focus on where we can grow and how we can grow. And for me, this is a very exciting time to be focused on that. And we're very thrilled about the National Science Foundation, but also what that means in terms of all those folks who come to our city for their meetings and buy property, stay in hotels, eat in restaurants, shop in their shops. But in terms of this, going back to the bid idea, I think that we need to hear more from the business community, like they weighed in the spring. But adding on a tax is something that, I just think that we have to be extremely cautious about. And so what's right for some communities in this region in terms of a bid might not necessarily be right for Old Town Alexandria. Old Town is a very special place for the country, and our business community is evolving. Like any business community, some businesses, after 20 years, the owner wants to retire. So we've had some retirements for long-time beloved business owners. But the fact is that a lot of new businesses are coming in, and I'm constantly going to ribbon cuttings. So I hope that's a good sign.
What is the state of bricks and mortar retail? I mean, some places are going away, but I mean, you've got to have.
But new places are coming in.
New places are coming in, and you've got to have your places where people want to go.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we just recently had the sidewalk sale. The business community organized that, and it was, I think, a great success. We had tons of people out and about. But our farmers market in Old Town is always booming. We have actually a number of farmers markets throughout the city now. But it just, there is a natural turnover in business. But retail is changing. And people don't want to necessarily go to a shopping mall. Hence, Landmark Mall's changeover. I know you were maybe going to talk about that. We voted 4 or 5 years ago for Landmark Mall to be redeveloped. We are doing everything we can to help Howard Hughes redevelop it, and it potentially could be very exciting, actually, in terms of mixed use. I think it'll be dynamic and exciting. But they had to buy out Macy's and Lord & Taylor, and now they're working with Sears. So this is a very complicated 52-acre property, but right off just north of the Beltway, and right there off of 395 and 2.
I remember Landmark Mall and back
we are very focused on it.
Heyday.
Yeah, but we're moving forward.
Let me move on. Let me talk to Chairman Randall about proffer legislation that was enacted last year in the General Assembly. It's been in place now a full year. In your view, how is this legislation affecting development in Loudoun County, and what potential changes do you see going forward?
Actually, it's been in place, this would be 2 years would be this General Assembly session, and exactly what I thought was going to happen, which is we have in Loudoun County not received one application for new residential development. We received some applications for rezonings of developments that already existed, but it completely put ice water on the residential development community, and which is what I thought was going to happen, to be quite honest. I was in the cities, towns, and counties subcommittee when that legislation was passed out, and I was sitting there, and I had been chair of the county for, I don't know, 15 days or something, so I was all bright, shiny, and new. And I came down to speak to them about how I thought this bill would impact our county. And one of my state delegates, John Bell, said, the new chair of the county is here, if she'd like to speak. They made a motion, they seconded the motion, and they passed it out without discussion, nor anyone speaking on it. It was done. It was done probably in October of the year before, and it has put a chilling effect on the industry. We were told last year, just give it a year to incubate and see what happens, and maybe something will happen next year. True, quite frankly, now we're told nothing's going to happen this year either, probably because of the election, and because the author of the profit bill is actually running for lieutenant governor this year, so maybe something will happen next year. But it did exactly what I thought it was going to do. Now, I want to take this opportunity that we're talking about the profit, but to talk about something else, if you don't mind, which is the two things that are going to most negatively affect business development, business growth, and business success in the region is transportation and housing. Housing is the thing that keeps me up at night, it's housing, and the lack of housing diversity. And if we think that in this region, people who need affordable housing are people who are just kind of down on their luck and not working, they're not paying attention. In this region, affordable housing is our firefighters, our police officers, our teachers, our nurses, our retail workers. And one of the things that the profit bill did was disallow us from asking for any affordable housing units above what is already allowed to be proffered unless you put them into the small area plan, which in Loudoun County, we now have 5 small area plans. And so the profit bill not only stopped residential growth, but it stopped us from being able to try to get more affordable housing in our housing stock. And so all the way across the board, I'm not sure what counties this has worked for, but it certainly has not worked for Loudoun County, and I don't think it's worked for most counties actually in Northern Virginia. So I know it won't happen this year because it's a political season, and that's just the way of the world. But hopefully next year, we will take a look at this profit bill, and hopefully we will either roll it back, maybe have a longer discussion about impact fees, or do something different, because this bill was a nightmare from the beginning. It's a nightmare now. It's frozen the system, and we can't get affordable housing out of it.
Sharon, Bulova.
Peggy, we've had the same experience with the proper bill. And essentially, it's just residential development sort of dried up. And developers are focusing on commercial, or they're focusing on parts of the county that are exempt from the proper bill in revitalization areas such as Tyson's, such as the Mosaic at Muirfield, some of the other areas that we've been able to exempt out. Shortly after the proper bill was passed, I was asked if we could provide some examples of where we could change things. What was our experience with the proper bill? And I said, well, we didn't have any experience with it yet. Let's wait for a year just for us to be able to see what the results of the proper bill have been. Well, it's been a year, it's been more than a year, and we still don't really have very much to share, because essentially development within residential areas has sort of dried up. And so we continue to, I really think, that this was a huge mistake that was made by the General Assembly. They did not understand land use, did not understand the way our different jurisdictions do land use. And all of us handle rezonings and the change of land use in different ways.
Sharon, sir, do you agree with that?
Well, absolutely, it's the same. It's the same all across Northern Virginia, and in fact, it's not just Northern Virginia, but other jurisdictions a little bit further to our south as well. The only rezonings that are occurring in Prince William County on the residential side are those that were submitted before, or was it July 1st, 2016? Is that correct?
Yes, That is correct.
This has got to be fixed if the development community wants to see, and we know there's a growing demand for more entitled properties out there. This has to be fixed. We're going to have to work together with the development community to get this done. Otherwise, what we're going to see is just what Chairman Bulova mentioned, and that is we're going to see the development of some undesirable properties, a lot of by right zonings, many of which were passed in the 1950s, 1960s, a lot of 2/2s, a lot of cheap stuff that we don't want. And so, and by the way, the development community doesn't want it either. These are properties that really should be subject to new rezonings. Unless this is fixed, we're going to see this lack of entitled properties. It's going to get worse and worse as we go on.
Peggy, if
Go
I
ahead,
could,
Jay.
we don't have proper zoning, so the bill as passed didn't directly apply to us. But I really appreciate Chairman Randall bringing this up and seeing the consensus
Yeah.
and unanimity up here. We would stand with you because that has had only negative effects from what we've seen. We're just glad here in Arlington, it hasn't applied to us. And any efforts you have to work with the legislature to change that, we would stand with you, absolutely.
Let me go back to Sharon. About that. We briefly mentioned Tyson's Corner. Let's talk about the transformation going on in Tyson's. Looking back, could something have been done differently? And what do you think was done well as we move forward in Tyson's and watch this explosion in growth? Our new Main Street, right?
Tyson's is exciting. And could we have done, would we have done something different? I don't think so. And remember that I think that the planning for Tyson's is a textbook case of how to involve and engage the community when you're looking at making a major change in land use. And so for 5 years, a group worked together, all stakeholders. So it was the commercial community, it was the retail community, the surrounding residential communities, and the small residential community that exists within Tyson's, the county, essentially the environmental community was very much at the table. And for 5 years, the visioning for Tyson's was done. And then the work was done to translate that vision into the comprehensive plan. And so once that comprehensive plan was adopted, the very next day, I think something like 7 rezonings were filed in concert with the new comprehensive plan and the vision. So I think that Tyson's is a success, but remember that the development and the vision of Tyson's is something that is going to develop over many years. And so it's, with the long-range plan for Tyson's was, I think it was a 40-year plan altogether. And so people need to be patient that the grid of streets will be developed as the development occurs, and also amenities are beginning to be proffered within the Tyson's area, for instance, for entertainment, for affordable housing as well, and that I think that is a positive model.
What about the walkability of Tyson's? I mean, it's still, you take your life in your own hands and you walk across 123. I mean, is there something being done that will make it more, the Mosaic District, you go there, it's all, everybody's out walking around.
Is fantastic.
What about that?
So the idea for Tyson's was to make Tyson's a walkable, transit-oriented community, and part of the tenet for the development of Tyson's is to establish a grid of streets. The streets, interestingly, are planned to be more narrow so that they're easier to cross, and there are more streets for traffic to be able to get around, so that you will not have the large boulevards that are impossible to get across. So again, the plan for Tyson's is evolving, and it will continue to evolve as the development occurs, and developers proffer the road network and the rights of way needed to be able to make it a more walkable community.
Okay. Chairman Stewart, the Prince William Board also made a financial commitment along with the state to build the Regional Center for Workforce Education and Training at the Woodbridge campus of Northern Virginia Community College. Talk about the increasingly important role this center plays as more jobs in Northern Virginia require credentials and certifications.
Look, this is a huge new issue. This is one that's really coming up. We're all going to have to pay attention to this because for too long there's been so much of a focus on getting your bachelor's degree, and then you have these students coming out of these universities and they can't find a job and they've got mounds of student debt. What we've got to move more toward is career technical education here in the Commonwealth. We've got a severe lack of those with certifications. People, welders, plumbers, drywall hangers, people who operate heavy construction equipment. All these things we have a lack of that. It's hindering business development. There is a pilot program that's been funded, but there's a very low level of funding in the Commonwealth, Virginia, and that is to provide, to allow students to go in there and get their career, their certification in a technical field. However, it's too small and it's not available to businesses. So in some states like North Carolina, Texas, Illinois, and several others across the country, with whom we're competing, allow businesses to work with the community college system, to go in there. They can provide customized training for their employees. It's a huge advantage for these states with whom we're competing, especially North Carolina. We've got to fix it. We've got to work together with the General Assembly. And most importantly, we have got to get the message out there. There is no stigma attached to working as a technical worker, somebody who doesn't necessarily have their bachelor's degree, but somebody who, when they get out and they get their certification, is actually making a whole lot more money than somebody who graduates with a BA or a BS.
We've got Northern Virginia Community College campuses across the region, not just in Prince William, but very important education center. Let me move on. Jay Fisette, you have been on the Arlington board for 20 years. During that time, Arlington has experienced tremendous commercial and residential growth. What have you learned from working with the business community over that time, and what advice would you give to your fellow elected leaders in the region about working with the business
Oh
community?
my goodness, me giving Sharon Bulova. Let alone Corey Stewart, right? Yeah, an opportunity here.
We can talk about DACA. I was thinking about that because, Corey, you just mentioned people who have all this technical advantage. As I understand, there's 12,000 DACA recipients in Northern Virginia, many of whom probably have some of those jobs that you're talking about. What, we're talking about economic growth and people who have these jobs. I'm sure it's of concern to the business owners who employ these people.
It's a tragic decision yesterday.
Yeah, okay, I'll speak, I'll include that.
You didn't jump on the first one, so I thought
What you
include that in response.
can say to your response on DACA is after it was announced yesterday, the stock market fell by over 200 points. That may be indicative of how sound that reasoning was. Just saying.
Well, I think we all know what, I think we all gather what the opinions are about the decision yesterday, but there, I'm sure is some sort of, as I said, there are some small businesses that employ some of these folks, and there needs to be some kind of decision, some kind of certainty is what the business community needs, right? Some certainty.
In the last years, a lot of the public policy decisions and issues that we address, either individually within our locality or regionally, they have a regional component, but we often put them in. We all have the same ringtone. You don't know whose phone it is. So my point is here that we tend to put at least the economic argument onto almost every public policy we deal with. Transportation, affordable housing has an absolute economic impact for this region. I would say that the issue you raised, DACA, meaning immigration, meaning the welcoming nature of a community, and here Corey spoke to North Carolina. North Carolina and Virginia. We have a governor now who is embracing the diversity and the differences among us as a part of our state and our locality's strengths in an economic vein, not just in a moral plane. North Carolina had some big problems in recent years. Businesses left, some sports events left. People are looking, the tech world, the business community are leaders in this area now. They're not followers. They're the ones saying on DACA and on the issue of diversity that those are important values for the business community. And I assume that most of you in here in the business world recognize that that is true for our region. For our community, we've made an absolute commitment to that. And we feel that has helped enable our prosperity and our strength and reinforce it. So back to your earlier question, the only thing I would say is that having done this, while I have always looked at kind of what I felt was the most important thing for my own community, I don't think I've ever isolated myself or stopped thinking about what's best for the region. Because what happens in Arlington is integrally connected to how well this region does. And our proximity to the nation's capital is fundamental to Arlington's success and to the Washington region's success. Does that mean we shouldn't diversify our economy? Of course not. We need to diversify. We can't forget, however, that the Pentagon and the federal government and the Capitol are all there and a major part of our tourism for all of us and our success. So as individual leaders, but also with a regional hat on, from my perspective, one of the things I've been talking about lately is in the business world, we used to have the Greater Washington Initiative. Doesn't exist anymore. In my view, while we all compete, and that's natural, there's a healthy competition when you're looking for new business. We should have some norms in the community about where we should and shouldn't step over that line. But we also can benefit from having a regional body, as GWI was at one point, that helped the region brand itself.
Well, I was just going to say that,
And
you're
draw
talking about the
people
region.
from elsewhere to the region so that our region competes well with regions all over the world. Also maybe does the research that can benefit everyone equitably and provide a forum for us and our economic development staff and professionals to talk and understand where that line is so that we don't step over it and just sort of change the chairs on the deck of the Titanic.
And of course, there's residents in each one of your jurisdictions who work in DC, in Maryland, and we talk about region, and I mean, this is just part of the region here.
Can
Of
I,
course, the most important part, I would say.
first of all, after 20 years serving in public office, Mr. Fisette will be leaving at the end of this year. So I am more than willing to listen to your advice, and I think your advice is pretty invaluable, so I'm going to miss you. You know, I do think that we need a regional body, and I think I wasn't here in office 20 years ago, so I can't speak to that.
Were you born?
I can't speak to that, but I will say that the COG, the Council of Government, is really stepping up, and I think a very big way to bring regional collaboration together. We had in this region a very short discussion about even the Olympics coming here, and of course that didn't happen. But COG was the body that was leading that discussion, and so when we talk about a body that truly understands what's going on in DC, Maryland, Virginia, and in the federal government, I think the COG, and I'm speaking not for them, I'm speaking from my opinion, I think the COG may be maybe the next body that can really do some regional collaboration and talk about regional trade and bring us together. And you're right, know where the lines are, but at the same time, make sure that we're having a discussion about what works. What's good for Arlington is good for Loudoun. What's good for Loudoun is good for Prince William. What's good for Prince William may be good for Montgomery County also. So I think that I don't feel as I feel kind of hopeful, to be quite honest, about the regional collaboration that I've seen. I've also been really involved in VACO and NACO since I've been chair. So I'm a bit of an optimist by nature, but I actually feel pretty hopeful about what we're doing as a region and how many conversations we are having. And I can tell you that I have reached out and many times went to many of my colleagues all around the COG region, including in Maryland. When I happened to have the county address, Ms. Bulova attended, as did Mayor Bowser attended my State of the County address in Loudoun County. And so I think doing some of these things and not maybe relying on a body to do it for us, but for us to walk out of our office, get in the car and drive around, look at each other, also not a bad thing. So I think we have some pretty good regional collaboration, and I'm very optimistic about what we're going to do in this area.
Rare to get you all together. I know Sharon Bulova wants to add one thing. I'd like to take a picture of Get them all together. Anyway, go ahead.
I know that we're short on time, but I did want to take this opportunity to thank Jay Fisette for his years of service. We are a great region, and we do work together, I think, very effectively. And issues and challenges and problems crop up, but we sit down together, as you can see. We work together on regional bodies, and Jay in particular, I have always enjoyed working with him. He has a great mind and brings good perspectives to the table that are appreciated and
Don't forget my sense of humor.
Well, I want to thank you all. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts this morning. It's easy to see why you're all in the positions that you have, because it's obvious you all care deeply, not only about the places you represent, but also this entire region. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
One last thing, and thank you all very much for coming and participating today. I hope I learned a lot.